does the least restrictive environment affect your child's IEP? Well, that's the topic of today's Facebook Live, and this is my part 6 of my 6-part series. And then we'll be going into some other great topics for the summer. So today I'm going to be talking about least restrictive environment, parents. Least restrictive environment is one of the most important decisions made regarding your child's IEP. If your child is not in the least restrictive environment that is mandated to them under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, then it could mean the difference between your child graduating high school with a high school diploma or receiving a certificate of completion. It can affect and will affect how your child leaves high school, whether they have the skills they need to gain competitive employment and move on to live an independent and purposeful life, or be disabled and maybe even end up living in a group home. So least restrictive environment is hugely important, and a lot of parents don't understand what least restrictive environment is, what it means, and what it can mean for your child. So before I get into it, parents, please leave your comments below. Please like and share this video so we can get the news out there to other parents who are seeking this kind of help and advice, other parents who are desperate. I'm getting calls daily and messaged daily now. This happens every year. It's the end of the school year. Parents have had it. They're frustrated. They're angry. Their kids didn't receive an education. Their kids got failed classes. Their children did not have their IEPs implemented. And at the end of the school year is typically when the parents reach out and try to get help. So this is important information, parents, and I'm going to offer you a way for you to get the help you need at the end of this live video. So I want to start out with a couple examples of 3 of my clients, and surprisingly they are all boys. And the first one is Matthew, and these are all least restrictive environment examples of success stories. So it gives a lot of hope, but also the gravity of the situation here with least restrictive environment. So with Matthew, Matthew's mom hired me when Matthew was in grade school. He was about 6 years old. He was in a special day class. He was hiding under the table. He was holding his ears and screaming. He was eloping and running out of the classroom, and he was nonverbal. And he was a typical little boy that presents on the spectrum of autism spectrum. And they wanted to place him in a severely handicapped class or an autism classroom. And so the mom came and hired me, and we were able to make sure that Matthew got all the supports and services that he is mandated under IDEA, that he deserves and has the ability to receive under IDEA. And through the years, after receiving all the supports and services that he required, he was able to be mainstreamed and then eventually fully included and placed in general education for junior high and high school. And he is graduating. He already did graduate last week, and he graduated with a diploma. He was in general education. He did amazing. He was in madrigals and has a great voice, and took part in all the singing programs in high school, traveled around in the competitions. Such a huge success story from the little boy that we once saw when his mom hired me when he was 6 years old. Now, if that mom hadn't learned how to advocate for her son, hadn't understood what placing her son in a severely handicapped class meant, and had the district done that, Matthew would have never graduated with a high school diploma. He would have never been able to take part in madrigals or have the opportunity to, or even know that he could be in madrigals. And we would have never found out he had this amazing singing voice, which we didn't know when he was little. All of these doors of opportunities of learning alongside typical developing peers, of being able to get A's and B's in general education and a general education curriculum, none of those things would have been afforded to Matthew. And his education would have been stolen from him, as well as he wouldn't have been able to leave high school with the skills he has now, that he can go on now to college or go to a trade school or go look for a job because of the success that he had in school. So that's Matthew. Dylan's my next guy. And Dylan, again, his mother hired me when he was in grade school. It was the transition from grade school to middle school, from 7th grade to 8th grade. And so in 8th grade in middle school, the first IEP they had in middle school, they wanted to place Dylan in a severely handicapped class. The mother, being very well educated, she had 2 doctorates. She was a professor at a college, and she said, there ain't no way you're putting my kid in a severely handicapped class, yet they were going to force her to do so. She came and hired me. We were able to get, again, Dylan. He had nothing on his IEP. He had some speech services. He was also pretty much very limited in his speech, close to being nonverbal. He would talk if he felt like talking, but you really had to force it out of him. And we were able to get all the supports and services Dylan needed as well, kept him, of course, on the diploma track as he moved through junior high and high school. And we uncovered that Dylan has a high, extremely high IQ for math. In fact, his math teacher in high school said that Dylan was the highest student he had ever had in his math class, and made Dylan his teacher's assistant, who corrected all the assignments and all the tests for that teacher, because he was so highly intelligent, took all the advanced college level courses in math, trigonometry, all of them. I don't even know what they are because I'm terrible at math. But amazing success story for Dylan. He also graduated this year with a high school diploma. Is going to, in fact, not just a high school diploma, guys. He lettered and he had got high honors. High honors. Now listen, think of the gravity of this. If they would have placed Dylan in a severely handicapped class, he would have never learned. They don't teach math in a severely handicapped class. They teach kids how to read a clock. They teach kids how to just do functional math. There's no more teaching algebra or multiplication, much less trigonometry, geometry, or anything else, which he took the highest level of math courses that you could take in high school. They would have had those low expectations on him, thought he was intellectually disabled, and he would never have been able to learn alongside typical developing peers. He would have never blossomed. We would have never found out his ability in math, almost a savant level ability in math. I mean, this is just unbelievable, these stories of what school districts will do to children's not only school career, but their future, their entire life will be damaged with these kinds of placements that have to do with least restrictive environment. So amazing success story for Dylan. My next little guy is Devin, and I actually have a picture of Devin because he sent it to me because he's so proud that he is graduating this year, and this is Devin. And Devin, and here's all of Devin's accomplishments that he put on the back of his, so many accomplishments for Devin. And his mom hired me when he was, again, in grade school. He got in, he was behaviorally acting out because his needs were not being met. They were going to expel Devin. They were going to place Devin in a non-public school for bad kids who had bad behavior, who get expelled from school. Had Dylan been expelled and placed in one of those bad junior highs and the non-public schools, junior high, high school placements, he would have been exposed to kids that were getting arrested, kids that were using drugs, kids that were, in trouble kids. That's the kind of school they were going to place Dylan in. And do you think he would have ever had the opportunity to gain an education, to learn? Those kids don't learn anymore once they're placed in a school like that. and Dylan would have never been able to have the opportunity. He came back, he was never placed in that class, and in that school, non-public school, because I didn't allow it. I fought it, and he was not removed from high school. And we got Dylan all the supports and services he needed, behavioral intervention that he needed, so that he became so successful later on that his services were able to be cut back so far. Just, he had accommodations was all he needed. After we modified Dylan's behavior and his needs were met. His needs were met through the IEP. And so Dylan graduated again this year with a high school diploma. Yet that would have never happened had the mom hadn't learned how to advocate for her son. So let's talk more about the least restrictive environment. What does that mean? So it is in IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is a federal statute, and it's in section 300.114. Okay, which is the statute in Part B of IDEA, and it says each public agency must ensure that, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are non-disabled, and that special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment, meaning general education environment, occurs only if the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in the regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. Now, what does that mean in layman's terms? That means that your child cannot be removed from a general education class to be placed in a more restrictive environment unless they have provided your child with all the supports and services available to you under the federal law. And then, if your child still isn't able to be successful in a general education class, they can then talk about a more restrictive environment and look at special ed. And then it goes down from there. There are different levels of special ed, the bottom being a severely handicapped class. Okay? So the school district must have a continuum of placement options, parents, and that continuum is a general education class, the typical environment, then an RSP class. Now across the nation and in different school districts, they call these different names just to confuse you. So an RSP class stands for Resource Support Placement, so resource class, meaning that your child, the resource class it looks just like a general education class, only it's taught by a special education teacher. And the accommodations are built in, so they go slower. The curriculum isn't doesn't move as quickly. The rigor doesn't move as quickly as a general education class. They have aides in the classroom, so they get more one-on-one support. They have a smaller class size, but they teach everything that they teach in a general ed class. And it looks very typical to a general education classroom. That's the first level of special ed. The next one is SDCs, special day class. It's just a little bit lower than an RSP class. Or I shouldn't say lower, it doesn't mean lower. It means a little bit more support than an RSP class. So there's more one-on-one support. It's a even smaller class size. The rigor is even slower, so they can repeat, reteach. They accommodate more stronger accommodations, and those kids might be a little bit more severe in their disability. Okay, so that's the SDC class. Now the next one is a severely handicapped class. A severely handicapped class, parents, please know this, is a class where your child is not going to receive curriculum. They're not going to receive general education opportunities to learn what kids learn in general education, learning math, learning reading, learning writing, learning history, learning science. all of the things that typical kids learn in school. These kids do not learn those things. They focus on a functional curriculum. They can make up that curriculum to however they want it to look, however they want it to be. There are some guidelines, but they're very loose guidelines on what that curriculum can be and how the kids are graded. They're not graded really. You can't fail in a severely handicapped class because they're not teaching curriculum. And it looks nothing like, it's a self-contained class, so they're in there most of the day. Some kids go out for maybe an elective. They might go to an elective. Of course, they'll go to PE, but some kids go to adaptive physical education. So it depends on the kiddo, but a lot of those kids are in there, self-contained the whole day, and they don't have opportunities to be around general education, typical developing peers. Some of those classes, even I've seen those kids, and this is typical, where work experience means that the SH kids go out and pick up trash after lunch. They pick up trash and they call that work experience. Do other general ed kids go out and pick up trash for the campus for work experience? No. Just the severely handicapped class does. They also, many times, this is typical as well, they will come to school later than the typical population. So they get to come to school later so that they miss the big crowd. That's the excuse they give. They're going to miss the big crowd, so they don't have to come to school till later. They don't get marked tardy or truant because they have late, they can come later. They leave earlier so that they can miss the big crowd on the way out. Okay, so shortening their day and also removing them from the typical population. And I can go on and on about other things that SH does that I think is a violation of civil and human rights. Then there are other placements like home hospital, and then there are residential placements, and there's also non-public school placements. Okay, so that's the continuum of placement options. So when can a school district remove a child from a general education classroom? When is that something that is lawful to do? So it must be discussed at every annual IEP meeting, placement, because at every annual, that's when you go over your entire IEP, including the placement of the child. They must explain why your child cannot be educated in general education. So if your child's in an RSP class, an SDC class, and of course an SH class, they have to tell you why your kid cannot be educated in a general education class. That's a question they have to answer on the IEP. Because IDEA is so strong on least restrictive environment in the natural environment, which is general education. The other thing is they must exhaust all supports and services available to your child before they recommend removing your child from general ed and placing them in a special ed class. If they don't give you all the supports and services that would be appropriate for your child before they remove them, they're removing them unlawfully from the typical environment. So here's what the law says about that. In implementing IDEA's least restrictive environment provisions, the regular classroom in the school the student would attend, if not disabled, is the first placement option considered for each disabled student before a more restrictive placement is considered. So they have to look at the school that your child would attend if they didn't have an IEP. So none of this, oh, we have the perfect class for your kid, but it's, 10 miles on the other side of town and your kid's going to have to be bused for 2 hours to get there because they drop off kids and all the, it takes some of these kids sit on buses for an hour and a half to get to school when they're bused. Okay, unless the parent takes them. But why would you have to drive 10 miles across town to take your kid to school? That's unlawful. The next thing, if the IEP of a student with a disability can be implemented satisfactorily with the provision of supplementary aids and services in the regular classroom in the school district, the school would attend, if not disabled. That placement is the least restrictive placement for that student. So that's just saying that the placement that they offer your kiddo should be the correct placement, would be the least restrictive environment placement, if it can be, your kid can be successful in that class with all the supports and services available to your child. That's the least restrictive environment. So least restrictive environment is individual for every child. You have to look at it individually for each kid, because each kid has different needs, unique needs. And the next one, however, if the student's IEP cannot be implemented satisfactorily in that environment, even with the provision of all the supports and services, the regular classroom in the school the student would attend, if not disabled, is not the least restrictive environment for that student. So they're saying that, just like I said, if you're in general education and that you develop your IEP to get all the supports and services that are available to your child to meet the needs of your child, and then your child still is not successful in general ed with all the supports and services, that's when they can bring up the conversation of moving your child out of general education. And it goes down from there, even if it's a resource class. If the child's not successful in resource, they have all the supports and services available, they can talk about a special ed class, special day class. Okay, so it goes down the ladder from least restrictive to more restrictive to more restrictive to the most restrictive, which is severely handicapped class. Okay, so then number 2, what does the school district have to consider in determining what placement is appropriate for your child on an IEP? So they have to consider, parents, the goals, accommodations, and services which drive the placement. So I've talked about the IEP process. I've been talking about it for the past 3 months. The IEP process, first is assessments. Then they look at the previous goals, if they met them or not. Then they look at the present levels of academic and functional performance. Then they look at the goals for the upcoming year. Then they look at the accommodations for the upcoming year. They look at the services, and then they determine placement. So the goals, services, and accommodations determine the placement for a child, because it drives each step of the IEP process, drives the next step, and all of them together drives the placement of the child. So the what do they have to consider is the overriding rule in placement, in that each student's placement must be individually determined based on the individual student's abilities and needs. It is the program of specialized instruction and related services contained in that student's IEP that forms the basis for the placement decision. Just like I said, so it's the related services and the specialized instruction, the accommodations, that forms the basis of the placement decision. So in determining if a placement is appropriate under IDEA, the following factors are very relevant. The educational benefits available to the disabled student in a general ed classroom, supplemented with appropriate aids and services in comparison to the educational benefits to the student on an IEP in a special ed classroom. So you compare the general ed classroom with the appropriate aids and services in comparison to the special ed classroom with all the appropriate aids and services, and which one is going to be the most appropriate for that child. And then the non-academic benefits to the disabled student from interacting with non-disabled students. So they have to look at, okay, if the child's going to be in a special ed class, they are not going to have the same benefits as when they are in a general ed class interacting with non-disabled students, typical developing students. That's a question they have to answer on the IEP, and a huge thing they have to consider. And the other is the degree of the disruption of the education of other students resulting in the inability to meet the unique needs of the disabled student. So if your kiddo is one of those kiddos that has a lot tantrum behaviors, maybe screams, maybe he's constantly eloping out of the classroom, maybe even scratching or biting or hitting, those kids are going to disrupt the rest of the students in that class, and that is a determining factor of placement. It just is. Now, a parent can always come back and say, look, my kid's doing that because you're not meeting the needs of my child behaviorally. Where's my ABA or my RBT aide trained? Where's my highly trained aide? So that my child can, we can modify my child's behavior and replace the negative behavior with positive behavior. You know, do you have a good behavior intervention plan? Have you gotten an FBA, a functional behavior assessment? There's lots that needs to be done before they can just say, well, your child has bad behavior, so we're pulling them out and putting them in a special ed class or a more restrictive environment. Do you have all the supports and services available to you before they do that decision? Make that decision, okay? Again, it always goes back to that. And school districts may not make placement decisions based solely on the factors of the following. They cannot make placement decisions based on the category of your child's disability, which is huge to me because this is my soapbox, which my head explodes every time I hear, oh, your child has autism? Well, we have the perfect little autism classroom, the PALS classroom, or the whatever they want to name it, STEPS, STARS. They have all these little cutesy little names for the autism classroom, okay, which is unlawful. They cannot make decisions based on category of the disability, okay? The severity of the disability. Can't make decisions of placement on that either. Configuration of the delivery system, meaning one size fits all. So, oh, we have the perfect program here for your kids. So your kid's going to fit into that box of that program over there. So we're going to put your kid in that class because that's the program your kid needs. Nah, unlawful. Availability of educational related services that, oh, we have a speech and language teacher that comes into the classroom twice a week over here in this special day class. So your kid's going to get speech and language twice a week at 20 minutes because the speech and language teacher comes in twice a week to teach speech and language to the whole class. That's not individualized speech and language, guys. That you don't move a child to a place to get services. Special education is not a place. It is supports and services brought to your child to meet their unique needs. Okay? Availability of space. Okay, that's a biggie. So, because lots of schools are impacted, there's no space, and they say, well, we don't have, or also the big thing is numbers in the classroom. Well, we don't have, that class is full. Your kid can't be in that class, it's full. So we're going to have to move your kid to another school site over here where we can fit in your kid. No, it says right there in IDEA, availability of space. They can't do that. They do it all the time. Administrative convenience, meaning that, which I have 2 cases right now in this situation, that the special day class teacher does not want my clients in her class because even though it's a special day class, they want to place them in a severely handicapped class because that teacher does not want those kids in her class because they have some significant needs and she doesn't want to deal with those significant needs. So administrative convenience, okay? So parents, those are some of the most important things regarding least restrictive environment. The most important decision that and most important thing you need to have knowledge about, most important thing you need to understand what the least restrictive environment is and the available of continuum of placement options for your child. Okay, so again, this is why I'm offering my parent brigade parents this summer. Parents, you need to join the parent brigade this summer. You need to join the parent brigade because you need to start learning all of these things that are available to your child, all of these decisions that if you don't make these decisions, they're going to make these decisions for you. The IEP is going to determine whether your child graduates with a diploma or if your child gets a credential of completion, whether your child is going to have the skills they need to move on after high school, to get a job or go to a trade school, or go on to college. Lots of kids, we thought when they were little, well, we didn't know, but if you would look at a child when they're small, you would think, how's this kid ever going to go to college? How is this kid ever going to start, learning how to communicate? And you can't imagine the stories that these kids supersede far beyond the expectations of what people believed when they were small. My daughter Chanel being one of them. The UCLA team of pediatric neurologists told me my daughter would never read, she would never write, she would never talk, and she'd never be successful in school. And she did all of those things with flying colors because I didn't believe them when she was 3 years old. I never believed them. And I didn't believe the school district when they wanted to place her in a severely handicapped class 2. And I had Chanel included in general education in all through her grade school years. And then in junior high and high school, she was placed in an RSP class for most of the core curriculum. And then as much as we could, she was in general ed, all as well in junior high and high school. And she graduated with honors, you guys. And she did absolutely learn to read, learn to write, learn to talk, and was very successful in school. Had friends, did amazing, completely blew out of the water the bleak predictions that I received from the team of UCLA pediatric neurologists, as well as the local school district. So parents, it's up to you. It's all up to you as the parent to make sure your child receives the IEP that they need to meet their unique needs so that they can reach their potential in life after high school. It's up to you, parents. So please join the Parent Brigade. It's for you and for your child this summer, you guys. We don't have school. You have time. You have time to start learning how to advocate for your child and strengthen your IEP skills and be ready for the next school year, parents. And I have one more thing to say, you guys. You can hire an advocate or attorney to fix your case, to fix your IEP, to come in and win for you. Absolutely, I do that. I've done it for 24 years where parents hire me to come in and fix it. But guess what happens, parents, after an attorney or advocate leaves? You're right back to square one because then they're not there anymore. And if you don't know your rights, you don't know how to do this, then they're going to take it all away. You have to learn how to do it. If you have a kid on an IEP and if you really want your child to be a success story like Matthew, like Dylan, or like Devin, then that's what's you got to happen. That's what you got to do. I did it, you guys. Any parent can do it. So I hope to see you in the Parent Brigade. The link is right there in the Facebook Live today. And I hope you have a great Memorial Day, you guys. God bless, and I'll see you next Monday on my next Facebook Live.